This is a 10-stop walking tour of downtown Fort Worth. Start at, I'll call it the top of downtown, and look at the Old-World Building of the Tarrant County Courthouse. Next stop, this tower, it's an apartment condo complex. There are fossils on all four sides. And then you have to sidestep down a few streets to go find the First United Methodist Church. What a gorgeous piece of architecture. We stumbled on S.B. Burnett Park. And you know what? As a bonus, I'm going to show you this really cool fountain, but you'll have to watch the full video. This is the corner where JFK gave his last speech. And then this Flatiron Building. Any of you been to Manhattan? The Fort Worth Five in bronze. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And then there's St. Patrick Cathedral, the Old-World Building called the Hurley Building. Find out its history. The Fort Worth Water Gardens are spectacular. Welcome to downtown Fort Worth, Texas. This is the first stop in our 10-stop walking tour of downtown Fort Worth. It was a great Saturday morning and we found 10 great stops, and this is where we started, at the Tarrant County Courthouse. Oh, as soon as we got out of the car, this lady said, "Hey, the guy on the mower just told us it's free parking on weekends." That's a great thing. Thanks, Fort Worth. You made our visit easier. Oh, look at that new world building behind this old world looking structure. Isn't that awesome? The Tarrant County Courthouse was built in the Renaissance Revival style with pink Texas granite in 1893 and completed in 1895. Only 2 years to build this beautiful structure. And the clock tower? Oh, that thing's impressive. I wonder why. Well, I can tell you why. In 2012, it had a $4.5 million renovation. We walked completely around this gorgeous structure on this windy, beautiful Saturday morning. What I find interesting as a researcher is to find inconsistencies. Where I had found that this structure was built of pink Texas granite, this sign says it's red Texas granite. You decide, is this granite red or is it pink? If you like architecture and you want to see more old world architecture, go to my architecture playlist. There's other videos there that you'll certainly enjoy. I think it's pink, and I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And they had this lovely flower bed. Have you subscribed yet? You know, as we were walking around, this old school sign caught my attention. Joe Dashies Credit Jewelers. Hey, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks. Tarrant County. I never knew who Tarrant County was named after. A bit of great Texas history. 1784 to 1815. It says it was organized in August of 1850, and it was named for General Edward H. Tarrant. It's always interesting to read these historical markers. General Edward H. Tarrant. He was born in 1796 and he died at Fort Belknap in 1858. He was a veteran of War of 1812. Wow. Active in Battle of New Orleans. Wow, that's Old Hickory's battle. Do you remember that song? He was a veteran of the Texas War of Independence in 1836. You'll want to watch my videos on Sam Houston and the San Jacinto Monument and the Battleship Texas. Those are some of my most popular videos. He was the commander of the Ranger Forces of Northwest Frontier in 1837 and a representative from the Red River District in Congress of Texas Republic in 1838 and the general of the Texas Militia defeating Indians at Village Creek in 1841. This was one bold guy, wasn't he? We found a couple of other historical things on the property. One was this marker about the Texas Christian University and this fountain. I was more intrigued by this fountain. It says it's in honor of my maternal grandfather, Samuel Benton Canty, 1861 to 1924, who watered his horse at this fountain? That's interesting. Good masters, his will earned due, ye humble beastie guy, justice and mercy's blessings flow, nay less for him than ye. Interesting. It says that this horse fountain was rededicated June 4th, 1999. Well, that's nice. I think the horse's name is Pennyworth. Regardless, it was a beautiful little fountain, and the clock tower, it's a beauty, isn't it? All right, stop 2 will be next. It's a condominium complex with fossils on each of the 4 sides of the base of the building. The tower, stop 2 on the 10-stop walking tour of downtown Fort Worth. Remember, parking's free. The tower, formerly Block 82 Tower and Bank 1 Tower, is a 35-story building located in downtown Fort Worth at Taylor, Throckmorton, West 4th, and West 5th Street. You'll see clams, snails, turritellas, all kinds of sea life in these walls. It is the 4th tallest building in Fort Worth, and when it was completed in 1974, it was the tallest building in Fort Worth until 1983. And then you're never going to guess what happened. In March of 2000, 2000, it was damaged severely by an F3 tornado, and it was going to be demolished. But no, instead it became the tallest residential building in the city. We're on our 10-stop walking tour of downtown Fort Worth, and here we are at the First United Methodist Church. It's located at 800 West 5th. Just go 4 blocks west of the Fossil Building. The church is a Gothic revival building inspired by the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France, with a triple portal entrance, pier buttresses on the uneven corner towers, tall stained glass lancet windows, marble-filled arches on the front facade, and a 3-story arrangement. In 1853, itinerant pastor John Wesley Chalk rode horseback through Tarrant County, and on October 29, 1929, the day of the worst stock market crash in U.S. history, ground was officially broken for the new church. And on October 30, 1930, members locked the doors of the old church. And this is stop 4 of our 10-stop walking tour. And as we were jogging back over, we came across the 50-foot-tall brushed aluminum man with a briefcase. It sits in Burnett Park. If you haven't subscribed, can you subscribe, please? Mr. Burnett gave the city of Fort Worth this land for the purpose of creating a place of recreation in the very heart of the city. This is such a unique piece of artwork, balanced in the sky with adjacent skyscrapers. We notice the reflection of the man in a window across the street. This is stop 5, and this is the location of President John F. Kennedy's last speech. And as a reminder, free parking on weekends. That is so helpful. This memorial is located on the southeast corner of East 8th Street and Main Street. We celebrate the past to awaken the future. John F. Kennedy, 1960. John F. Kennedy started his last morning on Earth in Fort Worth. This statue and other tributes call attention to this fact. This spot is well lit and a nice place to see in the evening or during the daytime, of course. There are many pictures and quotes on the memorial wall. On November 22, 1963, before that day's tragedy saddened Americans everywhere, the people of Fort Worth reveled in President John F. Kennedy's enthusiastically received visit to our city. Even though a cold, hard rain fell in the early morning hours, thousands gathered outside the Hotel Texas to see and welcome our president. The rain stopped and President Kennedy appeared on schedule to greet them. A platform had been erected for his speech, but President Kennedy first rode directly into the excited crowd shaking hands. He thanked his large, rain-soaked audience and began his remarks. There are no faint hearts in Fort Worth. President Kennedy spoke of global economics, national defense, the country's ambitions in space, and Fort Worth's role in aviation history. He challenged America to bear the burdens of leadership. You'll want to wait to the end of this video so you can hear John F. Kennedy's most famous statements. Later, at the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce breakfast in the hotel, he delivered formal remarks centered on Fort Worth's historic and continuing role in national defense. As the motorcade traveled Main Street, thousands cheered and ticker tape rained from office towers. The sun was shining, and President Kennedy's last 2 speeches rang in the ears of those who had been lucky enough to hear them. Jim Wright, Fort Worth Congressman and Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. This is an excerpt from his inaugural address in Washington, D.C. in 1961, and it contains probably his most famous quote. In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. This is part of our 10-stop walking tour of downtown Fort Worth, and this is stop 6, the Flatiron Building. Look at this architectural masterpiece. It's located at Houston and West 9th Street. Oh, parking's free on weekends. The Flatiron Building was known in the early 1900s as the tallest building in North Texas. It was erected in 1907 for the renowned Dr. Bacon Saunders. He was the dean of City Medical College, a chief surgeon, and acclaimed as a pioneer of medicine in Texas. This Renaissance revival structure was inspired by the wedge-shaped Flatiron Building in Manhattan. New York. It is reinforced concrete over a steel frame. It was entered into the National Register of Historic Places in 1971. At the time of its completion in 1907, it was one of the city's first steel-framed buildings and the tallest building in North Texas. All right, this makes 2 buildings on our 10-stop walk that have been the tallest building in North Texas. That's pretty amazing, don't you think? Dr. Saunders, he reserved the top floor for his office, of course. The building was to be located on a Flatiron-shaped corner and was originally known as Saunders Triangle Building. William Jenkins Worth, a man for whom the city of Fort Worth is named, is buried in Worth Square, whose obelisk points to the base of Manhattan's Flatiron Building, which inspired the design of the Fort Worth Building. How many of you have seen the Flatiron Building in New York? I have. Others, raise your hands. The facade is divided into a 2-story base supporting a 5-story body, capped by a heavily ornamented cast iron cornice. The east and west facades are further divided into bays by piers which rise to arches in the top level, and the building carries further ornamentation in the form of carved panther heads above the 2nd story and brick lozenges. We weren't able to get into the building, but I would have loved to have been able to see the elevator lobby of the Flatiron with its classical details. Because of the Panic of 1907, the original design of 10 stories was nixed, and it was scaled back to 7 floors. As we were walking on the west side of the building, I peered through a window and saw this beautiful photograph on an easel. It's a photograph of the building. I don't know what year it was. I couldn't tell because the window was not clear enough for me to see through. This really made for an interesting picture. We found the official historical medallion for the State Historical Survey Committee. This is what we found on the west side of the Flatiron. It's called Panther City Fountain. The wit and imagination of the citizens of Fort Worth in the early 19th century have been perpetuated in the nickname of Fort Worth as the Panther City. A newspaper story reported that Fort Worth was such a dull and drowsy place that a panther was seen sleeping in the city on the steps of the courthouse. This story captured the imagination of early settlers of Fort Worth. The name was catchy and stories carried forth the panther theme. The local newspaper, Fort Worth Democrat, added to its masthead a drawing of a panther, further adding to the historical significance of Panther City, and live cubs were housed at the city fire hall and at many of the local businesses. Wow! At one of the community parades in Dallas, a small town east of Fort Worth, that's funny. The representatives of Fort Worth carried panther cubs on their floats in representation of the city, where the West begins. Many citizens talked about panthers roaming through the frontier town during the early settlement period. Okay, next stop will be stop 7. Have you ever heard of the Fort Worth 5 photograph? Have you ever heard of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? And have you ever heard of Hell's Half Acre? Well, if you know just a little bit, you might know more than most. Tell a friend about my channel and share my video on your social media. Thank you. This is stop 7 on our 10-stop walking tour of downtown Fort Worth. We're going to talk about Hell's Half Acre and Butch Cassidy's group of bandits. One of Fort Worth's most famous legends is that of the notorious Hell's Half Acre. Famous visitors to this area were Bat Masterson, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Sam Bass, Mary Porter, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid, as well as the Wild Bunch. Controversial in its heyday and historical now, Hell's Half Acre is currently home to many of downtown Fort Worth's attractions. And we are visiting many of those in this 10-stop walking tour, Fort Worth, where the West begins. Butch Cassidy's bandit gang operated in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada for 5 years between 1896 and 1901. Their agenda included robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches throughout the area. The Wild Bunch was part of the larger Hole in the Wall gang, which took its name from the Hole in the Wall Pass in Johnson County, Wyoming, which several outlaw gangs used as their hideouts. They performed the longest string of successful train and bank robberies in American history. Oh, and by the way, you can rent a bicycle if you don't want to walk. And these bikes are free on the first Friday of every month. Check your calendar, Fort Worth Bike Sharing. But again, don't forget to subscribe. The Fort Worth 5, one of the most famous photographs in Western history, was taken on November 21st in 1900 at John Swartz's gallery upstairs on 705 and a half Main in Fort Worth, Texas. A Pinkerton agent later called it the bad luck picture, since the gang's downfall began through their impulsive decision to dress up to the nines and have their portrait taken in a professional studio in Texas, ways away from their last coup. A displayed copy of this unarmed shooting eventually broke the Wild Bunch manhunt open. These famous outlaws are positioned at 1006 Houston Street, just to the south of the Flatiron Building and across from the convention center. They had traveled to Fort Worth to unwind in its Hell's Half-Acre district. As I mentioned earlier, photographer John Swartz snapped the 5 outlaws in a studio portrait, and he liked it so much that he displayed a copy in his lobby. This photo became the photo on the wanted posters. This life-size bronze replica of the Fort Worth 5 photograph was commissioned by Fort Worth neurosurgeon George Cravens. It is sheltered from the weather, which keeps it in top-notch condition. Butch Cassidy sits on the far right. I'm standing next to Butch, and the Sundance Kid is on the far left. The Wild Bunch consists of Harry Longabaugh, Sundance Kid; William Carver, his nickname was News; Ben Kilpatrick, Tall Texan; and Harvey Alexander Logan, Kid Curry; and Robert Leroy Parker, Butch Cassidy. Next stop is Stop 8 at the St. Patrick Cathedral. Wait till you see this complex. Alright, only a couple more to go. And this is St. Patrick Cathedral. It was erected between 1888 and 1892 under the direction of the parish priest. He was a native of France. Stone for the walls was quarried locally. Improvised horse-powered lathes were used to turn and polish the 18 interior pillars. Ceilings and window frames are wood-grained. Stained glass windows were imported from Munich, Germany. St. Ignatius Academy Building, the first Catholic school in Fort Worth. The first classes were held in 1885. This 4-story limestone structure was used for classrooms and a chapel, completed in 1889. It is a good example of Victorian institutional style. School classes were conducted here until 1962. Wait till you see Step 9, the Hurley Building. The history on this building will blow your mind. I was captivated by the signage across the building. Constructed in 1889, the Hurley Building originally occupied the northwest corner of 7th and Main Streets. The Hurley Building burned in 1898. Dynamite was used to bring down the remaining skeleton of the building. Construction of the Hoxie Building began in 1898. It was raised in 1919 to clear the way for the Farmers and Mechanics National Bank Building. When it was completed in 1921, it was the tallest building west of the Mississippi River. In 1950, the building was sold to the Continental Life Insurance Company. In 1960, the original facade was modernized by partially removing the original details on the lower 4 floors and covering with blue Mexican glass tiles. In 2021, this old building was repurposed into a Kempton hotel. Our last stop, the Fort Worth Water Gardens. We made it. This is stop 10 of our 10-stop walking tour of downtown Fort Worth. We are at the Fort Worth Water Gardens. It's all behind the hedge. Let's get down there. We found this map. There are several pools to see. Walking down the steps, the Quiet Water Pool is our first stop. Philip Johnson referred to the story Alice in Wonderland in the description of his design of the Fort Worth Water Garden. He delighted in creating a visitor experience similar to Alice's, of growing bigger or smaller and never knowing when either would occur. Visitors to the Quiet Pool experience both sensations. The small stairway leading to the pool makes visitors feel bigger than their surroundings. After entering the pool, visitors suddenly feel smaller. Johnson very carefully removed any objects of human scale, giving visitors the feeling that they'd suddenly entered a giant house. Philip Johnson used sound throughout the water gardens to create dramatic effects in the landscape and change the way people experience the space. The Quiet Pool is truly fully quiet and was specially designed by Johnson to create a sense of peace and calm. This pool's peace is the exact opposite of the noisy, active pool on the other side of the garden. Next up was the mountain, an oasis in an urban jungle. Philip Johnson and John Berge designed the Fort Worth Water Gardens as a series of micro-environments, each stimulating the senses. They designed the mountain to give visitors the sense of the real thing. Its 20-inch steps cascade into one another, creating the sensation of mountainous topography. The mountain steps, as well as the walls of the whole park, are 20 inches high, and the mountain rises 20 feet off the ground. This is not the only part of the garden where Johnson uses multiples of the same number. And it was tough to get a picture of this mountain without people climbing all over it, but I caught one. The mountain's 20-inch steps are a deliberate choice made by the architects. Instead of the standard 16 or 18-inch steps, the 20-inch steps were chosen by Johnson and Berge as a height that invited perching, not laying or reclining, just perching. All right, now the place that we all wanted to see, the place that people go to the water garden to go to and experience. The active pool expresses exuberance, exemplifying architect Philip Johnson's sense of play. In an interview about the park, Johnson described how he designed the active pool to appear like a canyon lined with rushing water. He arranged the descending viewing platforms so that the water travels beneath visitors as they walked to the bottom level. And I gotta tell you, that was a little bit of sensory overload. It was interesting. Unfortunately, on June 16th, 2004, 4 visitors, 3 children and 1 adult, died when one of the children fell into the central pool and the other 3 rushed in to rescue the child. The pool was closed immediately and a new design was constructed in 2005-2006 to make it safer. Scenes from the 1976 movie Logan's Run, starring Michael York, were filmed at the Fort Worth Water Gardens. The noise level in this part of the garden is intentional. Johnson designed the active pool as a mirror of the quiet pool. The all-encompassing peace and silence of the quiet pool is as absorbing as the noise of rushing water in the active pool. The sound of rushing water also wraps itself around the visitor, washing away reminders of the city lying just outside the garden's walls. It was awesome. I loved it. It was crazy. You gotta do it. It was a great way to end this 10-stop tour for sure. The final pool that we saw was the aerated pool. For architects Philip Johnson and John Berge, designing the aerated water pool presented some challenges. Johnson ultimately wanted the pool to be a visual illusion, giving visitors the impression that they could walk across the pool on tiles made of spraying water. The nozzles in this pool spray at the same height as the walkway without spraying the visitor, so that the water collapses on itself, looking ultimately like panels. This pool is playful, both because of its visual effect as well as the noise of the sprayer. The pool is 40 feet below ground level, and 38 special nozzles spray 871 gallons of water per minute. Boy, that's a lot of water, don't you think? Fort Worth Water Gardens. As we were headed back to the car, I saw this restaurant. Okay, reason to go back. There's always a reason to go back to great places, because you just can't do everything. We started at the Tarrant County Courthouse. It is located at West Weatherford, at the top of downtown. And this is where we parked, and when we got out of the car is when we found out that parking was free on the weekends, and that worked out great. We did move the car for stop 2. We parked at 5th and Taylor because the tower, the building with fossils on all 4 walls on the lower levels, was located between Taylor and Throckmorton, between 4th and 5th Streets. We stayed parked right there to go to stop 3, the First United Methodist Church. It is located at 800 West 5th. It was an easy walk down 5th Street. And as we were returning to go to our car, we spotted what would become stop 4, where we found this brushed aluminum man with a briefcase at S.B. Burnett Park. All right, now back to the car. And we moved and we parked on Commerce, a little north of 8th Street, because I had planned for us to walk Commerce Street back to the car after we'd gone to the water garden. Our plan got changed because of construction, but I didn't know that, so we parked at Commerce and 8th Street for our next stops. Stop 5 was the JFK Tribute. This was an amazing place to stand. This is where President John F. Kennedy gave the final speech of his lifetime. He didn't know it, and neither did anyone in the audience. Next is stop 6, and of course we stayed parked where we were, and this is the Flatiron Building. It's located on the corner of West 9th and Houston Street. It's a wedge-shaped building, very similar to the Flatiron in Manhattan. And stop 7, it is situated on the south side of the Flatiron Building, and it's the famous life-size bronze replica of the Fort Worth 5 photograph. Stop 8, and yes, we did stay parked in the same place, Remember, I did have a reason. And stop 8 is St. Patrick Cathedral. The cathedral is located at 1206 Throckmorton, just 1 block west of Houston Street. And then stop 9. We actually went to stop 9 after stop 10, but it made more sense to present it in this fashion. Stop 9. Well, you know why? Let me tell you why. I really wanted to end with the water garden. It was the grand finale. But when we stumbled all across this building, I certainly wanted to include it. It's the Old-World Hurley Building. I saw all these pictures and information attached to the side walls of this building. I was like, I have never seen this before. It was very intriguing to me. And one other thing, 3 of these buildings have at one time been the tallest building in Fort Worth, the tallest building in North Texas. It's just amazing the history you can find in our wonderful cities across America. And as I have presented in this video, the water gardens, a great way to end our visit and our 10-stop walking tour. And I had intended for us to just walk north on Commerce to return to our parking, but around the convention center on that east side, there was all kinds of construction and you couldn't exit the water garden park area onto Commerce Street. So we returned to the car via Houston Street and crossing over through Main to Commerce to our car, and then heading out East 8th Street to return to I-35. Easy on, easy off. Tennis shoes on the ground. Unclassic road trip. Tell a friend. Share my videos on your social media.